whether we like it in principle or not, you know, the manner in which the government protects the Constitution and defines particular rights and legislates those rights clearly is, there's a moral direction to that kind of activity. But, you know, what I'm interested in as a psychologist, and I think there's a new movement in thinking about the nature of morality, you know, there's one sort of higher form of morality, which is abstract principles of rights and equality and protecting those who are vulnerable. And that really is the work of the government. But there's all this everyday morality that we study in my lab of the ability to express compassion, the tendency to be grateful, to appreciate, the opportunity to revere and to feel wonder. And those are cultivated in our communities and in families and when there are resources and opportunities. So the government is affecting that form of morality as well. Absolutely. You know, there are different conceptions of leadership. There's, you know, the symbolic form of leadership, which says that's where the president's power really is. And then there's more of a kind of a bureaucratic conception of leadership, which is you lead behind the scenes in shifting policy and legislation. And I think, you know, and I've talked to a lot of journalists and social theorists about this, that, you know, one of the striking things about Obama is his pretty uniformly people believe there's a sense of trust and goodwill at the core of this person, and how it's spreading out in rhetoric and in the manifestations of his character. And if you read his inauguration speech, you know, the simple cooperative acts of extending an open hand to the Muslim world, referring to humility, new kinds of power, that's shifted the cultural discourse enormously. And that's, I think, a moral responsibility. The execution of goodness at the individual level, in my line of work, suggests it really honors these evolutionary principles that have led to the design of the human being. And those are principles like to be humble, to be grateful, to show compassion towards those in need. And those are the raw materials out of which groups form and institutions form. And when I work with you know, workplace organizations and schools, it is clear that those principles are in play at the institutional level. But institutions can separate from the laws of face-to-face interaction and start to adopt their own principles. We shouldn't say we're doing it, but you know, I think if you take the words of Martin Luther King, who said that, you know, the great arc of history is toward justice, and you consider that in the context of what he was fighting for vis-a-vis the government, which is civil rights and the end of the Vietnam War, that says that the government, you know, in legislating is defining our moral terms and having moral effects. I think, you know, one of the things that we've learned in the study of morality in psychology, and it's really something of a revolution, is that sure, there are abstract moral principles guaranteed by constitutions and the like, but morality is everywhere, right? It is in a child's opportunity to have equal resources. It is in the pay that executives take. It is in access to health care. It is in the quality of schools. Those are all moral issues, and the government is inextricably intertwined with those. So it has to be a moral agent, and we have to be honest about that. In a lot of ways of knowing, Buddhism, certain forms of Christianity, even in Darwin's own writings, as he thought about his theory of evolution, and it really was inspired by the death of his daughter, his favorite daughter, at age 10. There's a common assumption that exposure to suffering, your own or other people's, dwelling upon it, reflecting upon it, and in our research, that experience activates this moral nervous system, if you will, the vagus nerve and certain kinds of social behaviors and brain regions that we study. The common assumption is really to make progress. The first step is to understand suffering. And so I think one of the, as a parent of young children, you have this tricky balance to strike, which is you do see your children. I mean, children have astonishing responses to an animal suffering or when they see people who are starving or they hear about genocide. It really is astonishing. At the same time, you don't want them to be overburdened. And so I think we have to engage in those forms of suffering.